Hello, my name is
Ah,
Anubandh KATÉ. I am an engineer based in Paris, and today I have a great pleasure to welcome Ambassador Malay MISHRA ji, who has gladly accepted this invitation to talk to me. Welcome, Malay ji.
thank you very much, Anubandh. It's a great pleasure to come on your, see you after maybe a year and a half, and restart again our bonds of friendship. And I
Indeed.
greatly look forward to not only talking here but talking to you in Paris also when I visit you.
Thank you. I look forward as well. So I will briefly introduce you, and you could complement it if I miss something.
Yeah.
So your career, diplomatic career, spans 37 years, in
Yes,
which
that's
you
right.
had more than 15 postings. I mean, postings in more than 15 countries.
Yeah.
And importantly, you were the ambassador of Hungary, Seychelles, Trinidad and Tobago. I hope I
Yes,
pronounced them correctly.
that's right. That's right.
Right, and you have traveled to more than 80 countries as you love to explore and interact with different people and you're interested in their cultures.
Yes, very much so. And let me tell you, Paris was my first posting. I began my diplomatic career with Paris. So, whatever I had read about Paris, whatever from history, Paris had occupied a big place in my heart and
Right.
mind. So when I reached Paris, it was for me a great discovery and exploration. I spent 2 years of my initial diplomatic career in Paris, learning the language and civilization. I went to Sorbonne. I was there as a student, what we call our probation days, which means
Sure.
our training period, where in the foreign service we are supposed to learn and acquire proficiency in a foreign language.
Yeah,
So I was
I do
allotted French.
confirm. I do confirm that Paris is very enchanting, and I think to most people. So I'm glad you had this beginning here, and that you will be visiting us soon. But before that, I would also like to talk about your education background. So
Yeah.
you have graduated from Jawaharlal Nehru University in the 1970s, where you did.
I post-graduated. My graduation actually was in Odisha, where I
Okay,
was born. I graduated in political science with political science honors, and then I went to JNU, Jawaharlal Nehru University in Delhi, from
right.
where I post-graduated. I did my MA and MPhil, Master of Philosophy also, both in political studies and international relations.
Yeah, but could you? I'm quite curious because JNU is in the news for quite some time, and it's a very prestigious institute, which has seen quite turbulent times in recently. So how was the JNU of 1970s, and who were your batchmates, perhaps prominent people who we know now?
Well, that was a different JNU, I must tell you. That
Mhm.
is a JNU when it was actually a fountain of knowledge. We had excellent, professors, excellent study atmosphere, very good friends who were very enlightened people. My most important contemporary, I would name the present Foreign Minister of India, Mr.
Oh,
Jaishankar.
he was
He
your
was he was my batchmate. He was my academic batchmate. We did political studies together in the same center, Center for Political Studies, and we passed out in '75. And then again, we went to the School of International Studies in JNU, and we passed out our MPhil in '77. So we are of the same batch. He was my most illustrious, now, of course, the Foreign Minister of India. And there were many such people who have risen very high in their respective careers. Some have become great, literary giants. Some have become great activists. Some have become great media people, and so on and so forth. They have occupied prominent places, not only in IAS or IFS, IPS. Quite a few in IPS. So out of a batch of about 20 plus in our time, at least half of them went into bureaucracy. The other half divided themselves into various professions, but they all rose with distinction in their respective careers. So
Okay.
JNU, in fact, I always consider JNU as the soil which nurtured my latent talents and gave me that exposure, because we met people from various parts of India, even of different countries also there. So there was a freewheeling discussion, interaction. We used to talk to our professors as if they were friends. So there was no such a barrier between students and teachers. And teachers were like our friends. We used to walk into anybody's quarters in the, at any time of the day or night and ask any questions. And the best part was the library. The library was open till midnight, and we used to troop into the library after our dinner by 9 o'clock and study and study and study, because most of us were aiming at the competitive exams, at the UPSC. People who came from, average affluent background, like myself. You see, those days there are very few options. For example, there was not much of enthusiasm about going for teaching or even IT. IT was not well known there. I'm talking about the 70s in India.
Yeah.
We barely had a computer at that time. So our options were very limited. Either you went to this, the services, the bureaucratic, the civil services, what we call Indian civil service, or you became a teacher, or you joined one of those banks or other corporations, and you tried to make best of your career.
Yeah.
So in this limited framework, what I finally got was good. Actually, I joined the civil service 2 years before I joined the foreign service. I joined in the Customs and Excise Service, which is the indirect financial service of India. And I joined in the same year as Jayashankar joined the foreign service.
Right.
So when I went into foreign service 2 years later, he was 2 years my senior already in the foreign service.
Okay. There's another name from the present BJP government who was also in JNU is Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman.
Yeah, Nirmala came later.
Okay.
Nirmala must be at least 4 to 5 batches junior to us. So I didn't know her at all at that time, because there are many people
Hmm.
in and out of the government who are associated in some other capacity. Some were our contemporaries, some were juniors, and Nirmala Sitharaman was a junior person,
Right.
student. And I think she was studying somewhere abroad, and then she came to JNU and did her PhD or something like that from JNU. I'm
Okay.
not very sure about her career graph.
Okay. Before we move on, I must mention that you did MPhil there and your dissertation was on West Asian politics with reference to Iran's Gulf policy in the Shah
That's right.
era.
That's
Yeah.
right.
So we will later come to this part because it's interesting and I think not many people know about Iran, at least in India. So we will revisit this part later. But continuing with your educational assignments, I must tell that you retired in 2015, but even after that, you continued your studies in the sense that you did a postdoctorate in
That's right. That's right.
Budapest, right?
Yeah.
And
I
that
did a doctorate. I didn't do a postdoctoral. I did a doctorate. I did my
doctorate,
PhD. Yeah.
yeah, and it was at the Corvinus University, Budapest.
Corvinus University. Yeah,
Right.
in Budapest
Yeah.
is one of their national universities, you can say. And I had the good fortune of doing a enrolling myself as a PhD. You would be surprised that while I was still in service, I had joined as a student in there, and with permission of my government, of course. So I was doing some data collection and all that while I was still in service. And when I finally retired, that was in July 2015, I had collected ample data on the European side, because my PhD had two parts: marginalized communities as they are situated in Europe through a community called Roma community, and marginalized communities as they are situated in India through the Dalit communities. And in Dalit, Unlike the conventional Dalit theory, I had also included Adivasis as Dalits because I called them marginalized classes. So mine was a comparison between marginalized communities of India and Europe with particular reference to Roma in Europe and Dalits in India. And Dalits including the people who we know today as scheduled caste people and Adivasis who are the scheduled tribe people.
Yeah.
So that was a very comprehensive work. And after I had finished my posting there in Europe, when I came back, I was already having a bunch of data on the European part. So it was easy for me to continue on the Indian side. So I traveled, my field part was in Odisha. So I surveyed the situation of the Dalit communities, both SCs and STs, in 3-4 districts of Odisha, which I traveled extensively,
Yeah.
and it took me about maybe 2 years to collect all the data. So I joined for the PhD in 2015 and passed out my idea, got my degree in 2020. That was in the thick of COVID. So I could not go to collect my degree in person because of COVID restrictions at the time. So the university asked me that if I would be okay if they sent me the degree by post, which they did. But I couldn't attend the convocation to receive my degree in person.
Yeah. Talking about the Roma people, I must also tell that I had the fortune to work in Romania for 2 years.
Uh-huh.
There, I had also come across the Roma people who claim they have a link with India.
That's right. In fact, Romania has the largest population of Roma in Western and Central Europe. Largest population.
Okay.
Yeah. Most of these Roma people from Romania migrated to Italy at some point of time.
Yeah.
And from Italy, they went to other parts like France, Germany, and wherever they went, they retained their own local folklore, culture, religious traditions, cultural idioms, all that, yet they were named differently. So,
Yeah.
Roma being a generic term, they were called Sintis, for example, in Germany, and Rome in Italy, and in France also they were called by some other name. So like that. But basically, they were a part of a group of people who had migrated from India somewhere between the 9th and the 11th century, about 200 years of migration from out of India.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
if you want to know more about the migration pattern, they basically came from the northwest of India and a
Rajasthan.
few from the south.
Okay.
Uh, and these were basically people who were taken out by the Mughal, not Mughal, the Muslim invaders, because Muslim invasion had started already.
Mhm.
In the 8th century, it had started already. In the 7th century, even the Arabs had started landing their dhows on the coast of Gujarat, and there was trading going on between the west coast of India and these different Arab principalities in the Middle East. So that was an extension when we
Yeah.
had these Muslim rulers come, and when they left India, they took along them a bunch of people who'd be their help, basically, menial help, like
Yeah.
fixing the tents or running the horses or doing some magic. Or so these Roma people were initially trained into that, and
Yeah.
they served their masters,
It's
and they started the
fascinating.
immigration.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Thank you. Um, Closing on the education part, I have a question about the languages. So if I am not wrong, you also learned some French. Is that right?
Yes, I
Are
did.
there any other languages you learned during your career?
I learned, besides French, I learned a little bit of German while I was in Berlin.
Okay.
Um, I tried to learn Spanish, but never had an occasion to go to any Spanish-speaking country full time. So it stopped there. Berlin, I was there for 3 years. So I used to visit the Max Müller, the Deutsche Institute,
Okay.
learned a little bit of German. But my French, which I learned as a compulsory foreign language, it's called a CFL. That was quite good. In fact, in my batch of
Yeah.
foreign students in Sorbonne, We called it Paris 5. It still must be there in Paris 5. They have different campuses. So I was in campus 5. And there I stood first in my class. I actually wrote a dissertation also
Wow.
on a very intricate subject on the resistance movement of France, led by General de Gaulle, and the relationship between America and France during the initial part of the Second World War. So it was a very complicated theme, and I went to Normandy, where the Allies had landed, the American soldiers had landed. So I treated the Battle of Normandy also in that, and the personalities, this comparison between De Gaulle and the American President Roosevelt and all that. So it was an interesting study.
This is amazing because I keep complaining to Professor Christophe Jaffrelot that I don't find enough Indians who take interest in France to reciprocate what Professor is doing with India and Pakistan.
Hmm.
So I can now say that Ambassador Malay Mishra has done some work, and I really look forward to speak to you in French here when you are here.
Yes.
Yeah. So next I have on cards is about your career in the Indian Foreign Services and the different postings you had. And I think it would be a good chance also for the audience to improve upon their geography a bit. And that's why I wish to share my screen so that we could at least the three locations where you were ambassador we could check those on the map, and I hope you are able to see my screen.
Yes, I can see
Yeah.
the screen. I
I
was basically posted in Trinidad and Tobago, the
Right.
capital of this. It's two islands together. Trinidad is one island, and the
Yeah.
smaller one is called Tobago.
I'm just
And
zooming out. I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm just zooming out to give the big picture. So we are in Latin America here on the north, close
yeah,
to Venezuela, and we have some French islands as well. I think it was Guadeloupe. I saw Martinique.
yes, Guadeloupe is there.
Right.
Guadeloupe is a French island. Martinique also is a French island.
Yeah.
But other islands are all British colonies, erstwhile British colonies, which were, in fact, there was a very small island called Montserrat, of
Mhm.
which I was accredited also. It was a British, a kind of an overseas territory of Britain. Even now, even when
Okay.
I was there, it has not got its full sovereignty. It
Yeah.
has independent, it is an independent island with some 50, 60,000 population. So I have served in big populated countries and small population countries.
Yeah. But in
So
Trinidad, which year were you there? In Trinidad.
Trinidad and Tobago, I went there in the year 2009, and
Okay.
I was there until early part of 2013, which means I served about 3.5 years in Trinidad and Tobago. And
Okay.
during my time in Trinidad and Tobago, I traveled vastly to other islands which were also in my charge. Like you have just shown the map. You will see
Yeah.
Grenada on the north. Yeah, that
Right.
was where I had been several times. It's a beautiful island. And then
Hmm.
I had been to Barbados. Barbados was not in my charge, but I had been there. I have also been to St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Hmm.
I have been to Martinique, to Dominica was in my charge. So I went to Dominica.
Okay.
Guadeloupe I had visited. And then
Hmm.
Montserrat, you would see Montserrat there above, yeah,
Yeah.
Guadeloupe. That is where I have been also.
Okay.
And this was beside part of my overall territory in this region.
Okay.
And because of my frequent travels to these islands, I could study the island people, their mentality, the way they talk,
Hmm.
what they grow, what they eat, their
Right.
culture, their kind of dance forms, and all that. So it was a
Yeah.
very, very different experience for me, the islander experience, which was
Yeah.
very different from urban,
Yeah.
metropolitan areas like, let's say, Paris or Berlin, or later on Washington, D.C., where I spent 3 years.
Yeah.
So it was a very, very different experience. And
Yeah.
yes, Seychelles was my first posting as the head of mission. I was the high commissioner, small
Yeah.
island, small island, but
I will
you
zoom out.
had a,
Yeah. So that's close to Somalia, or Madagascar as well.
Yes, yes,
India
it's
here.
close to Madagascar, and you will
Yeah.
also see a small island called Mauritius, which is just down below, which is very close to Madagascar, Mauritius,
Okay.
where I was stationed for nearly 4 years.
Yeah, here.
Yeah, that is Mauritius, and Mauritius became my second home because my own
Okay.
sister, she has been living in Mauritius since she got married to a what do you call a Indo-Mauritian. And
Okay.
as you know, there are more than 70% population of Mauritius who are of Indian origin. And
Right.
my brother-in-law is himself of Indian origin, and
Okay.
he's a doctor by profession. So my sister, she married him while he was studying in India,
Yeah.
and then she migrated with him to Mauritius. Now she's a Mauritian citizen.
Right.
I
The next
visit
country.
Mauritius very often. My
Okay.
last visit was about a year ago, and I intend to go perhaps this year also because she's my only sister, and
Okay.
so we are only one brother and sister. So I visit her quite often.
Okay. Thank you. And the next country where you served is Hungary.
No, next country as a High Commissioner was Trinidad and Tobago, where you showed me this thing.
Okay. So say.
My last country as an ambassador was Hungary, and
Okay.
there I spent about a little more than 2 years in Budapest,
Hmm.
and it was a very, very beautiful experience for me. And that is where I did my initial period of research also,
Right.
while I was officiating as India's ambassador.
Yeah.
And it gave me access. It gave me access to the National Library and to other institutions and to the villages where Roma predominated.
Yeah.
And I used to go far and wide, and to many parts of Hungary I have been in the course of my
Yeah.
residence there.
When I read your biodata, you also mentioned that you were also in charge of Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Yes, yes. I was
And
accredited
this,
to Bosnia
yeah,
and Herzegovina, and
in
I used to visit Sarajevo
yeah,
maybe once in 2 months and spend some 10 days there, week or 10 days there. There
yeah,
also you find a good amount of Roma people
true.
in Bosnia and Herzegovina. But
Yeah, so
Bosnia and Herzegovina, as you know, was a breakout state from Yugoslavia when Yugoslavia broke out. The six countries which came out of it, you can see them all here.
yeah,
Uh,
that's why before you go ahead, I wanted to give some context here because in India we talk about the Balkanization of Yugoslavia, and
yeah,
that's how the reference comes for the first time. At least it came to me while I was studying history, at school. But that this is where this Balkan area or the ex-Yugoslavia stands. And I was
yeah,
quite lucky in 2022. I could take 2 months off and do a backpack and visit all these countries. And Bosnia that you mentioned, I must say it is quite unique because it has three ethnicities or religions. The Croats, which are mostly Catholic, you have the Serbians who are Orthodox, and you
yes,
also have the Muslim community there. So
yes.
yeah, could you tell us a bit about this Balkan area, the relationship that India has? For example, when I went to Albania, I could also discover that Mother Teresa came from Albania, and their museums
That's right. That's
talk
right.
about that link. So could you please tell us about India? I mean, from the point of India, the link to Balkan countries.
You see, as you know, the balkanization happened in towards the end of the last century, and was somehow it continued for more than 3 years. This kind of ethnic warfare and what we call ethnic cleansing today. What you are seeing in Gaza, for example, we could see similar situation in Bosnia. As you said, there are three distinct groups there: the Christians, the Orthodox people, the Russian Orthodox originating from there, and you see the Muslims. Muslims are in majority there, but they are constantly, uh, at least at that time, they were fighting for a separate state. Within that, within that, so the Serbs, which later became Serbia, which became as Belgrade as capital, and Belgrade was earlier the capital of Yugoslavia. So in the breakup of Yugoslavia, Belgrade retained as the capital, and this time as the capital of Serbia, which is the largest state among all the other six states. So the preeminent power, I would say, were the Serbs. But this battle between the Serbs and the Bosnian Muslims, which was basically on ethnic lines, it went on for more than 3 years. And until the US mediated this conflict and they somehow had a ceasefire, but it was a very fragile ceasefire, stayed for some time, again broke up, and again there were attacks from the Serbian side, and so it went on and on till at least 2003, 2004, and then Sarajevo has been a divided capital of Bosnia and Herzegovina. You will find different ethnic groups coexisting in Sarajevo. Sarajevo, if you recall, was also the site from where the First World War began,
Yeah.
if you remember.
Yeah.
So Sarajevo has a very historical connotation, and I also visited this place and visited the actual location where the Archduke was murdered, and which led the war to break out between Austro-Hungarian Empire and some parts of Europe, the First World War, which broke
Yeah.
out. So Sarajevo has a rich history, and Sarajevo itself is a very interesting place. They have a very famous film festival, international film festival, to which
True.
some of our Indian films also go. And I
Yeah.
had participated in that film festival also as the ambassador of Bosnia and Herzegovina. So I
Yeah.
love that place. And there are
Yeah.
beautiful locations there in and around Sarajevo. In Herzegovina is a very pretty place. And there, most of these ethnic battles are taking place around in and around Herzegovina and Sarajevo.
Yeah.
So those were very, very rich in history for me. And it was an eye opener how they fought and how they again co-opted into each other's way of life. And they are now a
Yeah.
composite group of people who are
Yeah. Just few
citizens
words.
of this.
Right. I think it also needs to be told that United States, along with NATO forces, they attacked Serbia in
Yes,
1999, including France,
that's right.
which was not part of NATO at that time because it had quit, and it re-entered in 2008. But the accusations, of course, there was violence and there was conflict, but it seems that the accusations of ethnic cleansing were a bit exaggerated. There were not concrete evidences to it, like the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And when I visited also Kosovo, for example, you have the largest military base of United States there. I could see also Bill Clinton's statue, and I was really surprised because, and yeah, so it's a complicated history. There are claims and counterclaims, but yeah, I think it's interesting to see how in the heart of Europe, you have a very different set of countries, and they are close to Europe, but they are still very different. And in some aspects, they quite resemble to India, I would say. Yeah,
And let me add also, Anubandh, to what you said, that the very breakup of Yugoslavia was on ethnic lines.
yeah,
You see, each of these six countries have predominant their own population, their own citizens who refuse to coexist with the Serbs. So that was the main reason. And Marshal Tito, who was then the head of Yugoslavia, who later on would form before that, of course, who had formed the non-alignment movement along with Nehru and other luminaries. He had given way to his successors who could not handle this pressure on an impending breakup of this thing. And you are right in a way that Americans had also been behind this breakup because they were part of that whole scheme. And then ironically, they also came to mend and try to terminate this long festering dispute. And Bill Clinton was the president at the time, so he took a very active role in that. As
yeah,
a matter of fact, I encountered Bill Clinton in one of their biggest, funerals, which they organized for thousands of, Bosnian soldiers who were slaughtered by Serbians on in a border town. And I had been once there, and I happened to meet Bill Clinton, who was
yeah,
no longer the president, but he used to visit. He used to visit every year for that commemoration
Right.
because thousands of soldiers were killed and civilians also there.
Yeah. Two things on this, and then we move on because we have I have lots of questions for you on other
Yeah,
topics.
yeah.
One thing was United States and NATO attack Serbia without the consent and accord
Of the
of the
UN.
United Nations,
Yeah,
and accidentally, it seems, they also bombarded the Chinese embassy in the capital of Serbia,
that's right.
Belgrade. But
That's right.
well, we won't go into that because otherwise it's unending. My question to you was, um, how long is the tenure of an ambassador, Indian ambassador?
Normal tenure is 3 years, but that is flexible. You sometimes spend longer period, sometimes less also. In some places like Paris, I spent 2 years only. Then I
Okay,
was posted to Senegal, where I spent 2 years again. Then I
okay,
went to Mauritius, where I spent 4 years. So it is not hard and fast.
okay,
But the average tenure is 3 years.
okay. So in the last 30 plus, I mean, not last, the 30 plus years of your service, you have seen different governments. You have seen UPA Congress governments, of course, then
Yeah.
UPA government. You have seen NDA under Vajpayee, and now the NDA under Modi. How was that experience as an ambassador uh, to be working for different governments of different colors?
You see, we are basically civil servants who are mandated to carry out the foreign policy of our country. And when I say that, I mean to represent our country in an overseas territory, whether it be an island, whether it be a big country, but we have to represent India's interests in that particular place. And all that comes with it, which means you have to handle multifarious, not only political, but also economic relations, cultural relations, diasporic relations, and, basically get across to leaders of that country, but send a message of what India is, what India can do, how we can, and we have already always have a constructive attitude towards the world, and wherever India has gone, it has gone through our apparatus of development aid, for example, through our line
Mm.
of credits, for example, where we support developing countries like ours in their growth process.
Yeah.
So, unlike other countries who may be having different kind of angles, India doesn't have that kind of agenda. India goes straight and builds friendships and extends aid and other collaboration. And also we have this ITEC program, that's a very important program, Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation Program, under
Mm.
which we send out our experts in various fields to those countries who need them. And they are paid by the government of India, while the hospitality is taken care of by those countries concerned. It's a very big global program. And at the last count, I think we had about nearly 120 plus countries where we have posted ITEC experts in various capacities.
Okay.
And besides, the mission will also have military wings and economic wing and railway wing if they are big missions.
Okay.
And for me, I work more in small missions.
Okay, Ambassador, I have also a question from the point of view of a lay citizen, because when we talk about a consulate, an embassy, an ambassador, there's a lot of seriousness which is attached. There's a lot of enigma, curiosity. So how is the life? How is the life of an ambassador? What kind of restrictions you have to respect? Do you have access to normal life in a way or not? How does it work?
You see, we are all governed by, first of all, the Vienna Convention in terms of our behavioral part, the protocol part, and we are also governed by the Geneva Convention. There are two important conventions. Vienna Convention came first, even before the termination of the Second World War, and Geneva Convention came in the early 50s. So these two conventions guide the life and conduct of diplomats residing outside the country. So our lives are not, I can't say that we have got full freedom as normal citizens should. We work within certain boundaries.
Mm.
And we, for example, for an ambassador, he has ultimate responsibility of the mission in which he is heading. So any kind of disturbance uh, inside the mission or outside the mission would reflect on the personality of the ambassador, that he has not been able to function properly. So my approach has always been a very coordinated and transparent approach. And I always delegate a lot of tasks to my subordinates. So in that way, there is some kind of a group working together and everybody feels responsible. So that has been my style of working. But there are other ambassadors, even in our service, who want to take everything on themselves. So when the credit comes, it goes to them. When the blame comes, it also goes to them. But in my kind of system, the
Mm.
blame oftentimes comes to the head of mission, whether you work alone or you work in a group. But it was my style to work in a group way, which means
Okay.
I used to let others also feel participating in that discussions. We had weekly discussions within the
Yeah.
mission, and how should we, fan out the week, and what work we should do, all that.
Since you also consider it important to interact with youngsters, young people, and you also guide them, what would you say if someone aspires to become or go into foreign services? What kind of education he or she should have? What kind of age limits? Are there exceptions or not? Could you tell us a bit about this?
Yeah, the foreign service comes as a part of the overall civil services examination conducted by the Union Public Service Commission in New Delhi, UPSC in short. So there are three categories. One is IAS clubbed with IFS, and the other is IPS, and the other category is central services. So IPS stands for Indian Police Service, IAS is Indian Administrative Service or Indian Foreign Service. Both are in the same category because those who are high up in the merit list, they can choose either IAS or IFS depending on the preference which they had put in their application form. So I chose IFS because I had always dreamt of becoming a diplomat in my life and taking a
Mm.
career as a diplomat. Because from the beginning of my studies, I had studied international law, international relations, I had researched on international relations. So I always had an outgoing temperament within myself. So I thought if I joined the foreign service and if I'm lucky, then I would have an opportunity to see the world, to see different cultures, which I did. I navigated various cultures in various parts of the world through my career as well as in my own interest. As you said, I have visited 80 countries, and they are true because 80 countries, big and small, as part of my life has been a very, very
Yeah.
big credit to me.
But sometimes we see in different ministries, be it BJP, Congress, or any government, there are some ministers who are parachuted. So, are there also such instances where people have been parachuted into foreign services as ambassadors or as foreign ministers?
Yes, at one time there used to be lateral entry. We had taken some ambassadors in the past, even from the army, on the army side. But most of them have been phased out now. There was a move by the Modi government
Hmm.
to take lateral entries into various services. Yeah, no, I was saying that even during the Modi government's time, now there have been efforts by the government to laterally introduce, specialists, what they say, from different branches of governance into the IAS or the IFS or other services. So the idea is that you get specialized domain knowledge, experts in their own domains. They come into foreign service and they can contribute in their domain what they have, achieved proficiency to the service concerned. This was not generally found favor with people who are in the service because they feel that they will take away the jobs of the career diplomats or the career administrators. So it is not very popular scheme. But somehow even the scheme of introducing private sector people into the government, that was registered initially, but the present government, they were very keen on that. So they disallowed at various levels, they were bringing in these people. So they disallowed entry at the senior levels, joint secretaries and above. But
Hmm.
even at junior levels, many people are coming, and they come for a fixed tenure, like for 3 years. And that is the mandate. After that, they have to go back to their parent service or whatever they are doing. But
Okay.
in our part, we are a professional career servants, so we will come as a fixed term. Like I did 37 years continuously in the foreign service. Similarly, my batchmates have done from 35 to 40 years, depending on which year they joined, and our retirement age is 60. So the day you become 60 years old, you have to superannuate.
As an ambassador, you are in a position of power. You are in a position of influence. And I will not be surprised if you confirm that you get to meet people from business community, from political communities, and there could be instances of gifts and conflicts of interest, and other perks. So how do you handle such I would say possibilities where you could be lured into something which is
There
not.
have been instances actually where a few of our diplomats have fallen prey to such situations. The temptations are enormous, and as you well said, when you are abroad, there are many kinds of people coming and wanting to meet you with their own interests. You have to filter out within your mind. You have to apply your mind that why is this person asking me to do this? And again, you have to go back to the fact that does it serve our country's interest? For example, industrialist comes to you and he wants to invest in India and he has got money. You are not generally asking me in the beginning, where did you get that money from? We don't much bother about that. That money is from his own account or from others' account. He says, I want to put a certain sum of money and build an industry in India.
Hmm.
We will see if that industry favors India's growth. If that is okay by our government, we will send a message to our government that so and so is coming. The background checks is done by other agencies, not by us, but we oversee that because we are there on the spot. So
Yeah.
there are certain very tricky situations also, as you very rightly said,
Yeah.
and one has to navigate between these, sometimes embarrassing situations also. But mostly in my career, I have seen that if you are straightforward and if you are honest to yourself, you can overcome these situations
Yeah,
very
I was
easily.
about to say, I think personal convictions, integrity are the
Yes,
values
yes,
which
yes,
are important in such kind of
yes.
jobs. But in your career, who do you look at someone as a role model, as a diplomat, as an ambassador, or a foreign minister? It could be from India or some other country. What kind of qualities were personified by such a person?
You see, the first quality you would look for is leadership quality. It could be an Indian or it could be a foreigner, somebody who has instilled leadership quality in his people, in his nation. Let's say I just give you out a name like is Mandela. Let's say Mandela. He is a perfect example of what leadership quality would mean by. For me, Mahatma Gandhi has been a forebearer of my inspiration. I have taken Gandhi along with me. I believe in the Gandhian principles of truth and nonviolence.
Mhm.
Truly, I exercise that in my life. It's not a theory for me. I exercise
But
that.
sticking to the foreign services, which example you could give as a foreign minister or a diplomat, who comes to your mind?
Yes, you have. I have a few senior colleagues who were very good in the jobs.
Mhm.
Initially, there was one. My first ambassador was one Mr. Rasgotra, who was my ambassador in Paris, my first
Mhm.
posting. He was an exceptional ambassador, and he handled. You see, those old timer ambassadors, and there were quite a few of them, who were appointed by Jawaharlal Nehru, our first prime minister, personally. They were men of immense integrity and immense honesty, and they are chosen because of that. K.R. Narayanan, who rose to be our president of India,
True.
he is a role model because though he came from a backward caste, he could rise up to the top. and he was also a diplomat. There are many such illustrious names I can give.
Okay.
And from outside, well, we have seen so many other diplomats play the part. Kissinger is one. I mean, he
Okay.
had certain flaws in his character, but in terms of diplomacy, he was solid. He worked
Okay.
for his country's interest all the way.
Yeah.
So,
Next question I would club, there are two questions, I will club them into one. Um, as a golden period of Indian diplomacy, which period do you consider? And there could be also a period of difficulty, a difficult period for the Indian diplomacy. How would you distinguish these two and which ones?
you see, I would rather answer this question by saying the phases of diplomacy in India. Initial phase was Nehru's period of diplomacy, where he himself kept the foreign minister's portfolio to himself, besides being the prime minister. So that was one phase where India was clearly going into this broad movement of non-alignment. That was one phase. I think that was an ideal phase where India image in the so-called third world grew, above its capacity. India became the role model for many countries in Asia, Africa, Latin America to be followed, because independence of India triggered the decolonization movement. So I would say the initial period of beginning of India's foreign policy, even before independence, the Congress had a foreign policy, and Congress had taken certain stands, which the post-independence period, Mr. Nehru took it upon himself. We became part of, and we agitated against apartheid. We are among the first countries to take the issue of apartheid in South Africa to the United Nations. We are among the founding members of United Nations. We were also one of the founding members of the British Commonwealth. And after we got our republic, our separation from, between independence and republic, we chose still to be a member of the Commonwealth. Those were the good, heady days of India's foreign policy. That was one phase. Then comes, I'm just giving you the main periods. Then comes Mrs. Indira Gandhi's phase. Of course, Shastri came as for a little period. He was also a very bold leadership and all that, but he exited very soon. Then Mrs. Indira Gandhi's period. Mrs. Indira Gandhi's period was a period of very strong foreign policy, and we had to handle Pakistan. And then she was also a part when Pakistan broke up and Bangladesh was born. And at that time, U.S. was very close to Pakistan. Pakistan was in their camp, and the Seventh Fleet had come very close to the Bay of Bengal. Even they were threatening India that they may even, come and fight the Bangladeshi Mukti Bahinis who had been trained by the Indian Army. But Mrs. Gandhi stood her guard,
Yeah.
and she was very firm. At that time, Nixon was the president of US, and Nixon and Kissinger, they were virulently against India and Indira Gandhi. But she fought her way, and Bangladesh did become independent on the 6th of December 1971. Of course, now there is turbulence in Bangladesh, and wheels are getting turned back again. But India had a very warm and cozy relationship with Bangladesh following its liberation. That is one phase.
Mhm.
Then came the phase of Narasimha Rao. That is a very significant phase, because that was where the entire paradigm of India was changing as the world's paradigm was changing. Because we had globalization, we had liberalization, our rupee had fallen in value, we had to borrow money, we had to keep our gold as deposit in the Bank of England to get money. That was a very, very lean period for the Indian economy. But Mr. Narasimha Rao and Dr. Manmohan Singh, his finance minister, pulled up India with by liberalizing a lot of things, by integrating India into the global economy. That was the biggest thing which happened, and that led to many changes during Narasimha Rao's time. He went to China. He opened, a negotiation process with China. Special representatives were appointed on both sides to handle the border management. He went to Israel. We didn't go to Israel, but we recognized Israel. Earlier, there was an Israeli representation in Mumbai only, a consulate of Israel. But we had state-to-state relationship during Narasimha Rao's tenure, and Narasimha Rao visited USA, and that was the beginning of what we call the India-US bonhomie. Started from that time, which Dr. Manmohan Singh carried further. And it was during Dr. Manmohan Singh's time that you had this civil nuclear agreement in
Yeah.
2008, the ABC agreement, and all that happened, and India became a part despite its two nuclear explosions. The second one was particularly bitter, during Atal Bihari Vajpayee's time, 1998, when India was castigated throughout the world, particularly from developed countries, because they didn't want to have India nuclearized. But we could still get our ground. And Vajpayee was again another leader, a great leader, I would say, who stood his ground. And Jaswant Singh was his foreign minister at that time.
Yeah.
So he sent Jaswant Singh to various parts of the world, including to US, and he
Mhm.
had long, I think, 15 or 16 sessions, bilateral sessions with Strobe Talbot, his counterpart in the US administration. This Strobe Talbot Jaswant Singh talks, they broke the ice in India-US relations. So
Yeah.
after that, it
Yeah.
was smooth sailing, and even many Americans thought that India would be a good strategic partner for US, and this
Yeah.
continued.
But how do you assess now the last 10 years of the NDA government under Jaishankar and Narendra Modi?
Well, Mr. Modi came on the plank of anti-corruption, basically, because the UPA too was mired in corruption, and he came with 12 years of experience as the Chief Minister of Gujarat. And when he came, he showed a lot of promise. He said that we will get the Gujarat model, which was, according to him, was a perfect model of communal harmony, of development, industrial, economic, social capital. And he said that this model will be well suited to India.
Yeah, yeah, sorry to interrupt, but I mean his foreign policy.
His foreign policy,
Yeah.
we found that Mr. Modi follows a very personalized foreign policy. He has a foreign minister, no doubt, my good friend Jayashankar. But what happened was the Prime Minister's office, what we call the PMO, took center stage in terms of formulating India's foreign policy. Decision making in India's foreign policy was somehow taken over by the PMO. And the foreign ministry, the external affairs ministry, was left to execute that policy. There has been a good rapport between our earlier foreign minister, Sushma Swaraj, and Mr. Modi, but they fell out. After some time, there were some problems. And then came Jaishankar. Jaishankar's equation with Modi has been very good. Their chemistry is good. Jaishankar carries out the task which Mr. Modi has given. But the difference now in Modi's foreign policy, on which many books have been written, is that it is more of a personalized foreign policy. It is more of a, touching my heart foreign policy that Mr. Modi goes around. He must have visited more than 60 odd countries by now. He travels far and wide. And wherever he goes, he tries to get a personal rapport with the leader of that country. And through him, he then makes further inroads how to protect India's interests and how to go
Yeah.
after that.
I have some comments about India's foreign policy in recent years, and I would like you to confirm or reject what I'm saying. Uh, I somehow think that with this trace on India being Vishwaguru, India being the mother of democracy, and all these high, tall claims that we have seen in the last few years, to me, it's a sign of insecurity where you really wish that you are heard and that your importance is recognized. And I see it in the contrast with what China is doing with its foreign policy. We know that they concentrated on the economic development, not just within China, but when they had surplus money, they invested in different countries in the world, including Europe, South Africa, I mean, Africa especially, and Asia. And when they were strong enough, now we see China is everywhere. Even the deal with Iran, they are now also, I think, also in Israel conflict, Ukraine. There is a say, and they don't have to claim and go overboard. So I see this contrast and I believe it's to somewhere it is related to an inherent insecurity. Do you agree?
To some extent, I agree with you. It is not exactly insecurity, but I think a kind of a self-importance which Indian leadership has given to itself. Because we always had a very high moral ground. We started with Nehru actually, where our non-alignment policy, which is still here, it is only non-alignment 2.0. The so-called strategic autonomy, which we often bandy about in foreign policy, is nothing but a rehash of non-alignment. Because our idea is that we are not aligning with any country, but we are looking at our own national interests to befriend various countries in the world, where we can be equally friends with Russia or US or China, depending on what our national interests are. So this is the paradigm in which our foreign policy is operating. Now, this Vishwaguru thing, it has recent coinage. It came, I think, in second phase of Modi's government. Post 2019, when Modi was elected twice, second time. It came more and more. It was heard more and more, basically to satisfy your domestic constituency of supporters of Modi. It had some kind of a, let's say, a Hindu touch in that. That guru is, typically a Hindu word, that you are the master of the world. And then this talk about being the Vishwaguru, that you are the master of the world, that also is a part of that flow. But I don't think people in India, currently in contemporary, scenario, they take that Vishwaguru thing very seriously. So it became Vishwabandhu. That Vishwaguru transformed into
Yeah.
Vishwabandhu. The point is that India wants to be a friend of every country. Of every country, we speak of peace, we speak of diplomacy. Mr. Modi went across to meet Putin as well as Zelensky. To both, he advocated dialogue and diplomacy. So that is the approach of India to arrive at even with China.
Mhm.
Recently you must have heard that famous interview of Modi in a podcast with Rex Friedman. I don't know
Yeah.
whether you have seen it. It's a 3 hour plus a long podcast in which he spells out various things about himself, his background, and he talks about China. He talks about Trump, America, and all that. So he speaks very high of China, and he says that we should not allow our differences to be transformed into disputes, and we should carry on, which
Yeah.
means he says that we can be friends with China because China is our largest trading partner, and lot of dependencies are there between India and China, so we should keep it going.
Yeah.
So
But which is kind of a surprise because we there are proofs now, and we know that China did encroach and attack and took a considerable amount of Indian territory, and the trade balance between India and China is in favor of China for for a
lot
huge
in favor.
margin. Yeah, and in spite of that, we are being hard more to Pakistan, but with China, we seem to be accommodating with what you just said about Mr. Modi's comments. But I have two examples, and for me, they are diplomatic faux pas or blunders, and you will confirm if it's true or not for you. But I think when Mr. Modi supported that time Mr. Trump, saying "Ab ki bar Trump Sarkar," and he went and campaigned for him. And we also saw the example where Zelensky went and supported the Kamala Harris. And so, how do you see how risky it is to all out go and support one candidate in a foreign country's election?
No, I think that was, in my view, not very correct. Not very correct. This entire thing which happened in 2019 in Texas, where both Mr. Trump and Mr. Modi were going around and up ki bar Modi Trump Sarkar. I think for a foreign leader to advocate openly that he's getting back again, getting re-elected, I think it was not well thought out. I think it was purely a personal initiative of Mr. Modi. I don't think the Foreign Office would have advised him that way. And the second year, the next year, 2020, that Howdy Modi, the same thing happened. Same thing happened.
Mm.
Because at that time, if you recall, we had this agitation going on for citizenship, against, India's, stand on citizenship and disallowing Muslims from various countries, citizenship and all that. So there was a big agitation going on at the time.
Yeah.
And Trump came in February 2020 at the height of that agitation. So there was again a kind of a spectacle of Mr. Modi and Mr. Trump going around in the Ahmedabad, in the stadium called Narendra Modi Stadium.
Mm.
Very, very interesting that a living prime minister's name is there. Instead of Vallabhbhai Patel Stadium, it was renamed Narendra Modi Stadium.
True. Since you mentioned about citizenship, my next question and is about citizenship, and we are reaching the end of this interview now. So it's about the long-standing demand of the Indian diaspora about the dual citizenship, and a lot of countries in the world do allow it. There are also certain which do not. But our neighbors, for example, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, they do allow and recognize it. So since now we have seen that more and more Indians are leaving India and for good in the last few years for economic reasons, perhaps political reasons or others. How important you think it would be considered for the to consider this possibility for the Indian Parliament?
You see, there are two things here. When you say dual citizen means you have to hold two passports. One, a passport of your own country where you are, and the other, a passport of the other country, which makes you a dual citizen. Our Citizenship Act does not permit giving dual citizenship to an Indian citizen. It does not. In fact, when I was in charge of the Diaspora Ministry as a Joint Secretary, it was called Ministry of Overseas Indian Affairs. We had researched a lot. We had interacted with our Home Ministry at the time. Home Ministry was of the view that in no circumstances we can give dual citizenship to Indian citizens, period. That was not. So, via media was found out in the Overseas Citizenship Card, OCI. So, we gave status of OCI to Indians who were in some way or the other linked to India post independence. So those could apply for OCI and they could get OCI status, which is somewhat, you can say it's like a green card. So if you have OCI, you are a green card holder for India, which means your movements are unrestricted. You can come and go. You can, except for applying for government jobs, you can study. You can have your children come and study in India. And
You
not
can
only
vote.
you, but your spouse also.
Yeah.
Even if your spouse is the non-Indian, she could be also a OCI,
Mm.
card holder. So this was a via media found because we do not get full dual citizenship, then we can give one and a half citizenship, let's say. It is not a
Yeah.
full citizenship, but it's a green cardship.
Yeah, but that's still a surprise for me, and I'm not able to understand because a lot of non-residential Indians, especially from United States, supported prior to 2014 and even afterwards Mr. Modi's campaigns, financially, morally, and with all possible means. And yet, it seems it was difficult for them to convince Mr. Modi and his government to grant the dual citizenship, which is, of course, is not possible presently, but other countries have done it. So, how do you explain this?
No, other countries may have done it, but there are many countries who have not done it. You see, and India, we have security reasons. I think the most important overriding reason is our security, that there have been instances of people going out of India and acting against India's interests. Look at the Khalistani movement now, which is going around in parts of America and Europe, and look at people who are openly championing the cause of an independent Khalistan. Now, Khalistan was a dead issue, and with Mrs. Indira Gandhi's death, we all felt that the Khalistan issue also has died because the root of that movement was gone. But again, it has revived, and it is getting full patronage in countries like Canada, even in US. In fact, during Mr. Modi's recent visit to Mr. Trump, it was not even mentioned with this Pannun, famous Pannun case. It was not even mentioned. So I think India has to bury certain very hardcore facts about itself, particularly on security. Now, as we talk, there is something called a security dialogue, not a dialogue, but a kind of a group of security and intelligence officers from various parts of the world who are meeting in Delhi. And Tulsi Gabbard is a part of that, who's the head of NIA now.
Mhm.
And there are spy chiefs from various parts of the world. It is organized by Mr. Doval, who is in charge of, who is the supremo,
Yeah.
the
NSA.
intelligence. Yeah, yeah. So he is organizing this conclave of security, and so security is the number one point which India is flagging in this: counterterrorism and security. So that could be a possible reason why India has been wary about giving full citizenship of
Okay.
another country to our citizens.
So if I can make a summary of what you just said in one line, you consider that granting dual citizenship could pose a security threat to India, and perhaps that's the reason why it has not been considered positively.
Security is one of the overriding factors
Okay, okay.
why this has been done.
Perfect. I'm really at the last question of this interview, and I would like to take you back to Budapest because I learned that there you promoted Vedanta Society of Hungary. Yeah, you
Yeah,
promoted
yeah,
Vedic studies and Ayurveda.
yeah.
My question was also in this regard because I know you have studied in detail Dr. Ambedkar's philosophy, his writings, and the cause of Dalit movements, Adivasis. That was also your subject,
PhD.
PhD subject, right? So how do you reconcile? How do you consider your approach is different to Vedic studies from that of RSS, BJP, and Modi? Because Dr. Ambedkar was very clear. He was not supportive of Vedas and other Hindu mythological documents.
You have to make a finer distinction there. Why Ambedkar was not in favor of the Vedas? Because he felt that the Vedas spoke of a pure Hindu language. In my study of Vedas, in my personal study, I have number of books on Vedas, and I have studied philosophers like Radhakrishnan, for example, who has written extensively on the Vedas. He finds Vedas to be very secular. He doesn't give a religious connotation to Vedas. And he says that the purpose of Veda is oneness. Oneness. He believes that unity, oneness, universal love, all that comes out of Vedas because Veda believes in every individual having a similar aspiration to reach towards perfection. Like Vivekanand, Vivekanand was a great Vedantist. But I wouldn't call him a Hindu in the current mode of Hindus. In fact, Mr. Modi's greatest inspiration is Swami Vivekananda. And Swami Vivekananda was a secular Vedantist, if I can put it
Yeah.
that way. So I would like to position myself in that category that there are a lot of things useful things you can learn from Vedas. But what happened in Ambedkar case is contextual. He wanted to burn the Manusmriti because Manusmriti had a different orientation together. He didn't like it. Then similarly with Vedas, he thought that the Vedas are a group of studies which are polluting the mind in terms of going against the Dalit classes, of which he was the champion. So it was more of a political approach of Mr.
Yeah.
Ambedkar, if I may say so, that he was against Vedas. But if I study his mind, I have studied many books on Ambedkar, and the recent one I studied is Teltumbe's book. If you read it,
Yeah.
his iconoclast, you will see that he did tell in Iola, he did tell that I may have been born as a Hindu, but I'll not die as a Hindu. So he converted. 6 months
Yeah.
before his death, he converted to Buddhism. And why he converted to Buddhism was also he has justified. But then he wanted to make anti-Hinduism plank as his political plank, to regenerate or instill the feeling of oneness and the Buddhist virtues of the way of scientific way of life and all that among the depressed classes, among the
Mhm.
marginalized classes. So there
Fair
is
enough.
no contradiction there. There is no contradiction there.
Okay,
You
fair
see?
enough. Fair
Yeah.
enough. Before we close, I must tell that you are stationed in Puri in Orissa,
Yeah.
and you are retired now, but you're quite active. You give lectures in different institutes in India as well as
Yeah.
in foreign countries on foreign policy. You also guide and inspire students. You have also dedicated your personal library for the public cause, and I have seen when I visited you in 2023.
Yes. You did give a talk to our students.
Right,
Yes, I
and
remember.
we're quite seriously working there and preparing for exams. I could see that. Um, and next, you are coming to soon to United States, and then you also plan to drop by in France and in Europe on your return journey. So I really look forward to meet you, to talk to you, and to carry forward this discussion.
Same forward. Same
Amb-
here. And I greatly look forward to meeting you in Paris and going from there. Thank you very
Ambassador,
much, Anubandh, for this wonderful time you gave me. And we shared a lot of views among ourselves. And we hope to keep this dialogue going. And I would like to enlarge my horizons with you and your friends. And in whatever way I can explain things, what is happening in India, how we can relate to the outside world, I'll be very happy anytime.
that's kind of you, and I look forward also to the second session where we
Yes.
will talk more about current affairs and world politics. So, Ambassador Mishra, thank you again, and
Thank you.
stay safe.
Thank you very much. Thanks for
Bye
this
bye.
interview.
Yeah.
Bye bye. Bye bye. Take care.